Welcome, everyone. We hear there were a lot of people waiting from the start, so we wanted to start super promptly today. We're tuning in from all time zones ourselves. I love it. People are already started. Lexington, Kentucky, Reno, Nevada, San Francisco, um, Chicago, France. Really, thank you all. Oh, Vienna. Wow. Anyway, thank you all so much for joining. I am Sarah Meister. Definitely my favorite part at the beginning of the photo book club when we do one on Zoom is that Tucson, Arizona, hi, is that we can see on the chat who's chiming in from where. And usually when we're doing these on Zoom, it's because we too are in different time zones. And that is absolutely true. I'm delighted to be joined by two people tuning in from California, one from Colorado, and I'll get to those introductions in a moment. But to begin with, I want to say a huge thank you to FotoFocus, the Cincinnati-based organization, photo organization that has been supporting the Photo Book Club. This is their third year, and they make really everything about this possible. So thank you to FotoFocus. We're looking forward to your new space in Cincinnati opening later this year. Um, I am Sarah Meister. I'm the executive director of Aperture, and we are a 73-year-old nonprofit publisher. So we started as a quarterly magazine, actually in Berkeley, not too far from where Richard Misrach is now. We've moved around the country and are now and have been situated in New York City for the last 40 years. And we will soon be moving to a new home on the Upper West Side in Manhattan, and we will be shifting our photo book club to that very wonderful space before too long. But for now, the photo book club was something we imagined as a way of helping expand the conversation around photo books with our audiences. Aperture has been publishing books since about 1965. We are honored to have published 9 titles with the esteemed Richard Misrach, one of the leading photographers of not just his generation, but I would say living photographers in the US in general. Noa and I are happy to be working on a Guggenheim Fellowship project where among his many lifelong accolades and awards, a Guggenheim Fellowship is one of them. And so, Richard, thank you for joining us. Thank you for trusting us with your work and for making such a beautiful backdrop to even on Zoom. This, just so you know, in case you're wondering, is actually always on my backdrop, but it is from an early project of Richard's, his first, in fact, Telegraph 3 a.m. that we will not be talking about today. Because we are here to talk about this amazing book, Cargo. It was designed by Masumi Shibata, and we're thrilled, Masumi, you're here from Colorado. I think you've done nearly half a dozen books with Richard so far. Is that true? Something like
Think so. 5 or 6.
5 or 6. And with Noa Lin, Aperture's amazing associate editor, tuning in newly from his new home in Los Angeles. So we miss you, but we're glad you're still with us, Noah. Um, and I think this was the first book that Noah edited independently as an editor, although he's worked on many other projects with us. So I think the best way to understand this book is, oh, thank you for continuing to chime in. We really do love hearing from where and seeing the messages. And we save these too, so that if Richard or anyone wants to look at them afterward, we can see hi. So maybe Clark, if you wouldn't mind, you'll pull up the flip through. We wanted this to be a sort of more contemplative experience of going through the flip through, but I'll explain a little bit about what people are looking at the beginning while we're flipping through it, and then I'll just be quiet and let you all enjoy what Richard and Masumi have designed together. So this is really an incredibly sublime meditation on the global trade routes that happen through cargo ships. Um, it is both timely and timeless. It emerged in the depths of the COVID pandemic, but has extended to our current day. Um, of course, there have been moments when this global network of trade has almost halted. Um, and he has, and these are details of how the titles appear, so we can talk about Richard's decision to do that. Um, but I think really, let's just spend a moment looking at these pictures, um, thinking about both their beauty and the industry and pragmatism of what they represent. And then when we finish that, we will flip back and oh, and then one of the two gatefolds. Um, I did take a great picture, and then I'll really be quiet, of when we first shared this book with Richard, of Noah and Richard enjoying a moment with it together over one of those amazing gatefolds. That also gives you a sense of the amazing scale of this book, which is really just a marvel to behold. All four of us have it with us in our laps. And of course, if you're here with us, you get a discount on it to use your PhotoBook Club code. Um, but Richard, maybe we'll begin with you. Hi, welcome. Tell us a little bit about how this project got started from your perspective.
Well, hello, everybody. Thank you all for tuning in. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you for the Aperture team. Aperture is just such a profoundly important, um, I don't know, just treasure in my life from all these years. I cannot tell you. I grew up with Aperture. It taught me photography. I used to go to the library. I lived on the West Coast, so I couldn't go to the exhibitions. So I've said that all before, but it's just so true. So I'm so glad that Aperture is so vital and it's getting a new home. This is incredibly exciting. So Sarah, you've taken to a new adventure, and I'm just thrilled to be along. So the cargo itself. Um, Cargo. So in 1991, I actually thought about photographing the petroleum vessels in the San Francisco Bay from the Bay Bridge. I would drive over the Bay Bridge to my gallery, Franco Gallery in San Francisco, whatever, and I see these ships, and it was during the Persian Gulf War. They had a lot of hidden political significance. And I actually arranged to photograph from the bridge with my 8x10 view camera, and I photographed them. And I photographed them, and they were all out of focus because the bridge shook so dramatically. And you don't know that when you're in a car, but when you're standing there with an 8x10 view camera and doing slow exposures, it's just shaking violently. So I gave up that project. That was it. And I forgot about them. But all these years, driving over the Bay Bridge or whatever, I would see these ships, not just the petroleum ships, but also these container ships, which are on the cover of the book. And I would notice them, but then they'd disappear because they're omnipresent. You'd see them and they were just omnipresent. And I then, you forget about them, and we all do that. Then basically around 2021 during COVID, in Southern California, Long Beach Harbor, all the container ships were being backed up because of COVID. Workers weren't able to go. And so we became aware of them. And it kind of sensitized me. And I started realizing that these things are so much in our vision every day that we don't pay attention. And so I started thinking about them. And first there was that. Then there was Houthi rebels attacking them in protests to the Israel-Hamas war. Um, and then one crashed into the Delaware Bridge. And then most recently, and this has been really interesting, for the first 4 years when I made all the photographs in the book, um, they, there was container ships every single day in the San Francisco Bay, every single day. Since the Trump tariffs, for the last 4 months, there's not been a single container. Actually, that's not true. I saw one backed up into the bay. Now, there's still some in the Oakland port being unloaded, but it's dramatic how the container ships have just, if I had to do that book again today, I couldn't do it today. They've stopped. So my point is this, container ships are really rich with, they revolutionized world trade when they first started coming out on the thing. They're incredible architectural engineering designs. They're amazing that way. And then there's people, the labor, the people that work on these ships and travel and spend months on these ships doing things. And then in the meantime, it's like, um, all that's happening. And then Rebecca Solnit wrote the text for the book, and she talks about the fact that uh, container ships create 3% of pollution of issues with the environment. So they're both great and they're problematic. And so they're very rich. And yet, again, for most people, because they're so there every single day of everybody's lives, we don't see them. But so part of what photography does for me, and part of the reason I'm so excited about it, is that it's a way of bringing to our mind, to our attention, these profoundly important architectural structures that have bearings on all the world as we know it. That's it in a nutshell.
And I feel like, Richard, that's so true of your work. You know, you often are showing us things that are all around us that anyone could see. And with this sort of sublime structure, or these inspira, and your Golden Gate series, but many of your desert cantos have, on the beach. But there's always another story that the photographs, if you look closely enough, that they're hinting at and intimating and complicating actually your enjoyment of whatever it is you're seeing, which is part of just what I love about it. Maybe just to open it, I will say also, and Brianna gave a fun fact that I think is pretty amazing. She wrote that from the World Shipping Council report, 1,382 shipping containers approximately are lost at sea each year, which makes me feel very grateful that whatever shipping issues we're having on our website, yours wasn't one of the 1,382 that was lost earlier this year. Um, so I do want to bring Masumi and Noa into the conversation. Maybe we'll start with Masumi about some of the design decisions, because from my perspective, and Noa, chime in if I'm mistaken, there was just no question in your mind who was going to design this book. The minute we started talking about it, Richard, you said, I know who I want to design it. So maybe you could introduce Masumi by saying why you were so certain, and then Masumi, you could talk a little bit about some of the decisions you made from there.
So you want to know why
Yeah, because, well, am I right? Was
yes.
it
So
clear?
the
Was it
bottom
as clear
line,
to you as it appeared to me?
yeah. So bottom line, what I do is every time I'm working on a project, part of the creative aspect of the project is for me to make the photographs at book size, if you will, determine the scale, then create these book dummies that are very rough. They're just, I slip the photographs in these art books, and that way I can create a sequence. And for example, Cargo, when I first started doing it, I was putting them by, light and color and things like that. And I said, no, that doesn't work. And I finally changed and I put them in chronological order. I made them in chronological and do it. And so that drove the layout and the sequencing. Then when I get it to that point, then I contact Masumi and say, okay, I need you to refine all this, put it all together, and do the beautiful thing with the fonts and all that stuff. But we've worked together on a bunch. I'm trying to remember the very first project. It might have been something for Frankel Gallery, and Masumi, when you talk, you can correct that. I don't remember what it was. It might have been the writing on the wall or some project. I just really loved working with him. We have a great rapport. He moved away to Colorado, and I was crying for a while, but I get over that kind of thing. Anyway, but that's by way of introducing him. And then Masumi just refines kind of he responds really well to kind of my basic notions of what I need, for my satisfaction, and then he takes it to the nether level. And on that note, Masumi.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I'm so lucky get to work with Richard for many, many projects. And yeah, I mean, it's, working with Richard's work is, as a designer, it's, I'm mostly just working on, I would say, like a negative space. Like I don't need to do anything to the story or the photograph. I'm just finding a way to surround the work so with and then connecting page to page so that it can speak for itself. So you know in terms of design elements, I just try to stay out of you know work as much as possible, make it least just distracting. um so yeah, and then you might think that's kind of easy job when you flip it that way, but for whatever reason, ended up spending more time on you know blank pages and blank spaces than where there's content. And I'm still trying to figure out how I can do that more efficiently, but I just spend hours and hours looking at white spaces.
That's funny.
I think it's a really interesting point about how you make the pages themselves a container for the images. And I hadn't really thought about that way, but you do intersperse the gate folds, the details of these folds.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about how you decide where and when
Yeah,
to do
I
that?
mean, just in general, and it's all true to all Richard's projects and other artists, photography books or any visual books. It's just you're looking still images one by one. It's not a video. And from day one, books have this power to let you fill in the blanks from one page to the other. Whereas video, it's feeding you the whole, continuous time. So I'm sure everybody has this experience, but when you're given limited information and you get to fill in the blanks between, or connect the stories, it gives you strong impression because your brain had to work hard, um, or you get to participate. So for designing books, that's I get to do that, but in many different potential ways that people would take it. So it's kind of like daydreaming about other people daydreaming almost. So and Richard's work, each image has so much information, just literally and metaphorically. So it's a challenge to connect one to the other, um, and because a lot of times single photo can be just as strong by itself, and so connecting them becomes you know very interesting and challenge. Yeah.
So for you, when you're zooming in for a detail,
Mm.
what is it that in other words, for me, it's like an answer to a curiosity I have when I see a plate and I'm like, and actually maybe that's a good moment to also tie in. We got the great question from Ian about the monumentality of your work and scale. And I think that's one of the things that both the physical scale of the book and its use of details really gets at. So this is the question. Um, Richard, and I think it's to Richard, but I'm assuming I think I'd be interested to hear you speak to it as the designer as well. Can you share more about the role that monumentality and scale play in your work? And you've used this 8x10 view camera. You make these large mural scaled prints, and they note your subjects: the desert, the sky, the border, natural disasters, and now container ships in the global supply chain. And so the question is scale something that you deliberately seek out or do you naturally gravitate toward this kind of enormity, as they put it?
I would say the answer is yes. Both those, both are true. I mean, and I was thinking about this because you give me a hint that you were going to ask about the scale because I wish I could do the book smaller. So like when we did the workshop book for Aperture, it was a small thing. It was great because it was really about the ideas and thoughts and stuff behind work and less about the work. But about the images. But for me, and you can see that on the pictures behind me in the studio, this is the small scale that's the scale that I do. I don't normally do, particularly this work, smaller images. And I think of like Picasso's Guernica or The Raft of the Medusa, these great classic paintings. You could say, well, the contents in there, why do they have to be so large? The Picasso piece is gigantic, right? And it's a dark subject, and it's about war, and The Raft of Medusa is the thing, and it's a gigantic painting. Why does it have to be so large? Because scale is an important part of the artistic language. And for my work, it's really important. So it's tricky because it would be nice to make a book smaller because it'd be more affordable and everything else. But I see the book as an artwork in itself. So even though it can't be the scale of a piece that's in a gallery wall, for example, scale is critical. And I go in pretty much with these. When I put together a book, I kind of determined that it needs to be a certain size, and I don't like bringing it down smaller because I think you lose stuff. For example, one of the pictures in the book, and if you want to pull it up, you can, but there's a little spot in the water. And you go to the next page and you open up, and it's a guy on a hydrofoil surfboard surfing. In the first picture, you can't even see it, but at least you can see the figure. Yeah. And so that detail is really important. Or in other details, yeah, if you go to the page before, very good. So there, if I went any smaller, you wouldn't even know there's even something there, right? And
Right.
so a lot of times what I do is a lot of my work actually builds scale into it. So you start to see things when it goes large that you just don't see when it's smaller. So in the book, I try to think about it that way. And I also think scale is really important to book. Sequence is really important to book. I think of the book itself as an art form, not just a record of all this information. It is a piece in itself. And it's unfortunate that it's so expensive to make these days. I just found an old review of my Telegraph 3am that's up behind you. And it was $17 when it came out in 1975. And in like the Village Voice, the New York Times, I got slammed because it was such an expensive book, a ridiculously expensive book. But the quality was really beautiful. And back then it was hard to get that kind of quality. And it was a relatively small book, but it's all relative. And so it's tricky because it'd be nice to make things affordable, but I don't want to lose that artistic quality. And I feel like our book captures that. And with Masumi's design, but also the printing in Italy uh, by
Portfolio. Yeah.
Trifolio, thank you, by Massimo in Trifolio. Oh my God, it's so beautiful. And that's what makes it transcend being just a record of pictures. And there's a place for record of pictures too, but this is a whole other level, and I love it.
Noah, maybe we'll bring you in by just saying, tell us about the creation of this from your perspective, the bringing together. You were even we threw you in the deep end and we said, good luck negotiating with Richard about the scale of this, and you really I think Richard knew how much we respected you. You soon earned that respect. But I think it might be interesting for people to hear, your role in navigating the practical, the artistic, and the design challenges of these things.
Totally. So I think at the point that Sarah, you mentioned this project to me as a potential book that I would edit by myself the first time. I had spent 2 years at Aperture working under Leslie Martin, who is a longtime editor here. And Leslie and Richard went way back. I think Leslie had edited most of Richard's books with Aperture. She had left a couple months before this book came across our desks to take on another role. So I think Sarah, you saw it as a good opportunity for me to get something under my belt, which I really appreciate. But yeah, it was the first big project for me outside of an assistant role. But I really felt like I was in good hands from the start, both kind of on Aperture side, the support from Sarah and our senior editor, Brendan Meister, but also with Richard, because Richard is such an experienced bookmaker himself. You can tell just how he thinks about books. There's years of experience there that I was excited to learn from his perspective. So it really helped that I think Richard came to the table with a really clear vision of what he wanted this book to be. And having him there to have strong editorial judgment and instinct from the start was helpful for me as someone who is kind of learning how to move a book through all of the Aperture machinery on my own to start with. So that was a level of support and learning that I appreciated. So thanks, Richard, for bearing with me as I was learning on the fly. All that to say, I think my role in this was in that way more kind of administrative project management, working with communication between Richard, with Masumi, with our teams here on sales and development, and everything else. So yeah, thankful to everybody for being patient as I figured things out.
I can't let you be too, anyway, you played a very important role in this, and you played it well. But maybe also, I think it's one of the things, this Aperture is an organization that's always been committed to the idea of how words and pictures live together, complement one another. It was our founder, Dorothea Lange, who said in her oral history, she said, all pictures can be fortified by words. And so maybe Noah, you take a moment and get into both how the titles live with the pictures and how maybe you and Masumi thought about that. And then also how Rebecca Bengal's amazing text, the decision to put that first and not at the end of the book. So thinking about words and pictures in the book as its editor.
Totally. I think I guess we're starting with the captions. I think Richard wanted each image to note when it was taken, and that information is held in the title. I think because the sequence is chronological and you get this sense of how these ships are moving in and out of the harbor throughout time, it's really important to see the different times of day when Richard is shooting these things, how there can be kind of gaps in time between the images, whether that's long or short. I mean, I think the beauty of the gatefold sequences that Richard and Masumi created together is that there are these moments of really collapsed time where it acts more kind of filmically in a lot of ways, where you can see through the captions that these are seconds or minutes apart rather than days. So you get a sense of the movement of these ships as they kind of move in and out of the harbor. And I think sequencing with the chronology at the heart of things helps you think about all the temporal logistics that are necessary for these ships to make their deliveries. So I think that was an important thing to keep the captions with the plates rather than to have sometimes what we do is we let all the plates run and then in the back have a title list. So I think that's why they exist together, and Masumi created a really beautiful way to handle that, working with the negative space, having Richard's image on the right and a blank page with a small caption or title on the left. I think it plays really nicely together. And then the other thing was Rebecca's essay, which
just to be clear, Rebecca Solen,
Solen, sorry.
Rebecca Bengal. I'm sorry, I haven't. So sorry.
Yeah,
Both Rebeccas. Both Rebeccas. Sorry, both brilliant writers, but not the same.
Yeah, who I believe is I'm Richard. You guys go way back, right? So it seemed natural that she would write about your work, and she's a fellow Bay Area native, knows so much about the history, and given her her interest in the environment and environmental activism too. I think there's an edge to these pictures that she really kind of gravitated towards and wanted to write about. And I think it's interesting too, because Richard, your images are so open-ended in a way that it felt surprising that the environment came to such a fore, because I know you and Rebecca had spoken about how it's more complicated than just a kind of singular indictment of these ships and the environment. There's all these questions of labor and industry that are important. So I think it was a really interesting compliment, and I think Rebecca's essay does a great job of mining the histories of both the Bay Area in general, how these ships play into a kind of colonial history, an extractive history of resources, but are in fact kind of necessary part of our day-to-day in this kind of global economy. So
Yeah. Can I jump in a little bit
Of
about Rebecca
course.
Solen? Yeah, so Rebecca Solen, she and I go way back. We've done, I think, 3 or 4 books together. She wrote for my mid-career retrospective that was hosted by the Houston Museum of Fine Arts that traveled in the US. She wrote the text for that. She's written essays for Aperture magazine about my work at the nuclear test site. Um, she wrote the text for my Sky book that was published by Arena Editions when they existed. And so now we came full circle. So I've always loved working with her. And yeah, so about the pictures, on one hand, the Bay, it is so gorgeous out there. The skies are so magical. The San Francisco Bay really is just, it's an extraordinary environment. I did it with the Golden Gate series from a very different perspective, but just celebrates that beautiful thing. But all the pictures in cargo, I could have easily done that book and removed all the cargo ships, whether digitally or just photographed when they weren't there and just done. It's not about just how beautiful it is, but it is the setting. And Rebecca talks about it as kind of this incredible backdrop for like chess pieces. And I think that's a really good way to think about it. I think part of what I love about what she did and what the book and the project's really about is, on one hand, it's really beautiful, and there's these ships in every single image in the book that at first you kind of don't know what to do with them. They're kind of mysterious and no meaning. So at some point you have to start thinking about them. And what Rebecca does is, in her brilliant way, she unpacks them, and suddenly you're thinking about 3% of global warming caused by these ships, and you're not seeing that. So I like that dynamic. I don't want it to be like a bad news event where it's just all put in your face, or just a celebration of the beauty of the place. It's more complicated than that.
Mhm.
And our world is more complicated than that. And I think they're more of a meditation on all that than a specific indictment, because you can talk about global warming, but you can also talk about um, work imbalances, labor imbalances. You could talk about world trade, the values there, the problem. So it's complicated and it changes. The way it was 30 years ago is different than it is today, and it's going to be different tomorrow. So it's not a fixed meaning. Those ships are constantly moving, so is their meaning.
Yeah. There was another great question from Esther who said, and I think this speaks a little bit to like what you're trying to do through photography as a medium. She asks that she noticed that all the pictures are taken from afar. So, what is the decision when you're photographing, not necessarily as a detail appears in a book, not to include close-ups or other angles? There are different spatial relations you could have with these ships. Would you speak to that?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. So there's 3 series. A friend of mine, Connie Wolf, pointed this out recently. She said, it's really interesting. There's 3 series you've done where you stand in the same place and don't move. The Golden Gate series, my On the Beach series. These are also Aperture books, and now Cargo Ship. So Cargo Ship, um, it's a really long story, but the bottom line is I'm in photographed from one spot within a 2-foot radius for 4 years. I didn't move. Now, all my other work in the desert cantos, it's me traveling my Volkswagen camper, 5 of them over 50 years, into the American desert for 2, 3 weeks at a time, just driving the back streets, the highways of the desert, looking for pictures. But this series, like those, the other two, I'm fixed in one place. And I nicknamed it at the still point of the turning world. It's this notion, it's a famous quote, a poetic quote, but it's the idea that if you stay in one place, everything you need happens. So I got excited about this one spot. All the pictures in cargo are taken from the exact same spot. Now, that said, I've been really starting to think, God, maybe I want to see if I can get permission to photograph in the Port of Oakland and go photograph the ships up closer. The scale is really great and things like that. So that's something I've been considering. Maybe I don't need to do that, but that would be a whole different way. But I think there's something about taking that one point perspective and defying kind of my strategies in the past of traveling and wandering and getting different perspectives and getting close up. And just, I think the repetition actually is a powerful meditation on the things. So it is different. Again, a photojournalist, if doing a story for the New York Times, would maybe go and do exactly, photograph the workers, photograph the ships close up, get details, show it in its environment, and have a different kind of story. This is not that. This is a just a
Yeah.
different kind of strategy.
There was a question about where you took these. Is that confidential information or is that information you?
Yeah, for reasons I should probably keep that because I'm also still photographing there, so I want to keep
Right. We don't want to let anybody else find that spot. Although I do think
Well, no, that's not it. It's just I'm maybe not supposed to be photographing from that
Oh,
spot.
okay. Well, we definitely don't want to get you in trouble.
Okay.
But I think also that's the map. Masumi, did you design? Can you talk a little bit about the map that appears at the beginning of Rebecca Solnith's essay? And I'll hold it up while you're speaking to that. But I think it does get to, without revealing all of your secrets or getting you in trouble. Did you design this? I'm sorry, I don't actually know.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, anytime I get to do cartography, I'm really happy. That's part of my my toolbox. But yeah, so Richard and I, after Rebecca sent us draft of the essay, we immediately both. I think Richard suggested first to include a hydrological map of California somewhere because she mentions how this is estuary for the entire Sierra Nevada mountains. So um and that just I was so excited. Okay, I get to do cartography because a lot of times I'm just moving typefaces and images. This is a chance to draw something. So yeah, we actually worked on this detail of the Bay Area, many iteration of them, just to create map that's we're not trying to present geographically accurate location of cargo ships or anything like that. It's just but we still have to express right amount of information. So yeah, that was interesting project.
It's
But
great. I think I found it very it sometimes you worry you tell too much about something and you're like, oh,
yes,
it takes away, the magic or the mystery. This, I was like, well, that is very grounding in some ways. And it shows you the way, that's kind of the magic of photography, is that within a series of constraints that you can make something that seems so open and endless in its creative possibilities. I find that remarkable. So I think the map is great too. And yes, thank you for putting in the full T.S. Eliot quote. Richard, I will say the chat and the questions are amazing, and everyone is, giving your full T.S. Eliot quote for At the Still Point of the Turning World. So thank you everyone for chiming in. There is another great question that I'd like to turn to, and this is from Helen, who saw the exhibition of your cargo photographs at Pace Gallery earlier this year. So one of the many lucky people who were able to do that. I know Noah and I count ourselves among them. But Helen wrote that she's also a big admirer of your Petrochemical America book, another Aperture title. And she's wondering how this project relates to that one in your mind, and if you see this project as an extension of that investigation into industrial influences on the landscape. So would you speak a little to?
That's really interesting because I hadn't seen the connection, but I just heard from Kate Orff literally 2 days ago, who is my collaborator, and she's got an organization called Scape. She designed the back matter for Petrochemical America, really brilliant intervention concepts for the Cancer Alley, the Mississippi River corridor, and the pollution there. And I was just thinking yesterday, hearing from her, God, I wish, along with Rebecca Solen's text, I wish I had brought Kate in and her team to do cargo and unpack that in a similar. It would have been a very different book, but it could have been very safe because she could have done just a brilliant, brilliant thing. Who knows? Maybe the second edition, because I think we're almost sold out of the first one. It's coming. It's coming.
It's coming.
That's probably unprecedented to change it, something like that. But to the bottom line is yes. So in the same sense, I just photographed these beautiful sites and left these mysterious ships there. But if you went and then took somebody like a Kate Orff to help you unpack all the different layers, I mean, there's so many different layers. I mean, it's so fascinating and amazing and worth unpacking. So
Well, maybe this is one of the things we try to do. Aperture has been focusing a lot on keeping books in print, where we see that there's continued interest in having them. And one of the things we've been doing is inviting someone to write a new piece that we might even release digitally at the same time as we reprint a book, just as a way of highlighting that. So, Kate, watch out. You might be hearing from us.
Kate, I'm coming for you, Kate.
There was another great question, and I actually think this is one where Noah and Masumi can kind of head off, but Richard, you can mediate this discussion. Adam asks, from your perspectives, what's the difference between book design and editing? Where does one end and the other begin? And Richard, we'll let you have the last word on this, on the difference between book design and editing. But I think it would be valuable to hear both Noah and Masumi's perspectives on that.
I go first, I guess. It's really case by case, project by project. Now I think, like, for example, Border Cantus, another Aperture book. I probably spent, more time editing than moving things around the page. Yeah, like
And what do you mean by editing there? Do you mean the selection and the sequence of the pictures?
Well, just
because I think editing can mean different things too.
Yeah. Organizing contents, selections, just hours and hours of discussing with Richard and Guillermo, how to present them, what to present them. And through that process, design just appears by itself. What I mean by that is how it's presented on the page and how big they are and how they relate to each other. That just, the process of combing through the content reveal that on its own. But then there will be some projects where, the there's an editor like Noah, and Richard works through the content, not in this case in Cargo, but contents beforehand, and then brought to designer, and I figure out how to present them in a way that they want to. So it's case by case. So yeah.
Noah, from your perspective,
Yeah, I would agree with like a lot of that. I think there's like a Venn diagram of like editing and design where there's like a little overlap in the center, but they seem different to me. I mean, in my head, there's kind of two parts of editing, and the part that would kind of uh, overlap with the design at least is that kind of um, editing the sequence, the kind of content of the plates and how that's treated, the kind of big picture of how do we want the book to look, to feel, to engage with the content within it. Those are kind of editorial questions, but also questions for design that I think can be handled in either way. There's another, I mean, I think as an editor, there's kind of two parts of your job. One part for this project, I think Richard himself really took the lead on before I even got involved, and which made it a good project for me, I think, to start on, which was that kind of big picture idea for the book, thinking of how all of these images will string together, that kind of content editing where you're in the weeds, you're like, how do all of these pictures amount to a book? And I think I learned a lot from how Richard came to the table with an idea for this chronological sequence, how he saw the pictures kind of existing on the page and all of that. And then I think there's another side of editing, which is the less glorious side, I would say, but equally important, which is the kind of administrative and project management side of things, where it takes so many different people to make a book. You're only seeing a couple of them here. We have teams at Aperture who are working on funding, working on sales, working on development. Rebecca, who wrote
production.
Yeah, production, copy editing, proofreading. So as an editor, you're kind of helping to coordinate between all of these different teams, keeping all of the information organized so that it can move from a brilliant artist's idea for a book into what Masumi has designed and our production team and the printers have actually produced. So I think that's kind of the way I see those things relating to each other.
Richard, do you have thoughts on that relationship?
No, just it's a beautiful dynamic as far as I'm concerned. I mean, for me, I do take I'm a lot hands-on in terms of editing and, content. I want to make, but then once it gets to finessing the size of the images on a page or the size of the print or even the font or, I'll weigh in, but it's really up to those guys to kind of do the heavy lifting, so to speak, at that point. But yeah, it's exciting.
There have been several questions also just about the materiality of the book, and I think about the paper stock, the printing process, and where it was printed. We printed it with Trifolio, which they're an amazing team there. It even makes it possible. Richard didn't go on press, and that oftentimes an artist wants to go on press to make sure that the book is printed, following the tonal structure and the balance and the weight. And we really at Aperture have we have a great production team who's working with Trifolio. But I do, in terms of the paper stock, I can't remember. Noah, do you know what kind of paper we used?
I think it's some kind of Garda. Am I?
Okay. Well, we're gonna have to get back to you on that one.
I don't know.
I don't know, but I will say it is beautiful, and the weight of the paper even, has a heft, because at this scale, you don't want it to feel flimsy. You want to have the sort of comfortable cadence of the pages unfolding as you're going through them.
Yeah, if I could jump in, just
Yeah.
design, production, materials. the printer who does, you know, what Trifolio did, it makes all the difference. It really does. It makes something that just will last for years. You know, and in the earlier days, again, before digital and all that, some of the books that I did, they just weren't printed well, or maybe it wasn't the right. It was much harder to do back then, and it's painful. You know, I look back on those things, I just wish it had been done differently. And
Yeah.
you know, my early night desert pictures, just it was needed tritone. They couldn't do it back then. So something like this, when it comes out so beautifully, you know, just the way they did that, it's really special.
Yeah. And I love, I don't know if you can see this in this, but there's like a little, just a super subtle spot laminate um,
Right.
on the text on the cover, which makes it read ever so subtly different. So, Masumi, I presume that was your decision direction, but you know, something, would you maybe speak? I wish I could show it better. You really can't see it unless you're
Yes,
touching
yeah.
it, but there's just
Um,
ever slight relief and a little bit of an extra gloss on these pictures, on this cover picture.
yeah, I love UV spot gloss. But yeah, production is, you know, it's really changes how you design things when you know how the things are produced. Um, and just on the side note, like so I build exhibits, do fabrications for science exhibits and things like that too. And it really um changes how you go around um in terms of design process when you know how things are formed or applied, or you know, it just opens up lots of possibilities. So book, in terms of book, I used to build a lot of books by hand too, and um it's really exciting when you get
Mm.
to play with papers or cover treatments. um so but in cargo case, yeah, it's just having this little subtle, like Sarah said, just one little touch, I think does a lot.
I think so too. I now, maybe we'll spend 1 second, and I think we can get into there was a question about any pictures that you left out along the way. You happen to have taken this picture that got to the cover, Richard. I don't even know if you know that, on my 50th birthday. So, and that's not why we chose it, but Richard, maybe you would speak to your choice of the cover image, and maybe use that as a way of also talking to you know, your process, because you made more than just the plates that are in this book, and sort of to tie up the design and the editing conversation about what's not in this, maybe. And then I have one last question before we
Okay, so yeah, so in that photograph, it just, you know, I think it's just those container ships are really bold. So since there's so many pictures in the book with container ships, but a lot of times maybe they're in fog, or they're subtle, or they're, you know, at dawn, or almost at night, or at night, or whatever. This just really, it says container ships pretty. It's just a good graphic, simple cover page, or title page, or yeah, cover. But sorry, what was the other question you had on that? It was,
Well, just about what you left out. You know, in other words,
oh,
whether, if you, since you made the decision to sequence it chronologically,
yeah.
what's not there?
Yeah, so that's the thing. So for every 50 photographs that you'll see, there's another 500 that don't make the final cut. I do shoot a lot, and it's all about, the editing is critical. It's a really, really critical process of any book. There's so many, and a lot of strong pictures got left out. That happens because, again, the way they move in the sequence, there's something about that. Um, Sometimes I would put four together that are just like a second apart. You know, there's a double gatefolds there for that kind of thing. Or sometimes there's maybe two back to back where it's just a couple minutes apart, and you can see great drama in the change in light. So again, it's all aesthetic choices, and at that point, um, and then there's a certain point where you kind of go, there's too many pictures. You know, they start to get redundant or whatever. So it's most in the end, it's kind of more intuitive than anything else in experience of doing this.
Art, not a science. I agree.
No. So it is an art, and I have many photographs that didn't make that book that are, in fact, some will be in my retrospective catalog because they were not in there, and they're really super strong. So that happens.
And the great cover ideas have left out too. There's so many, every project with Richard, there's 10 amazing cover designs we come up with.
We might need to do like a cutting room floor follow-up. I think of covers of pictures that didn't make it.
Very painful to have to, you know,
It is
face
painful.
those ideas and then take one.
Yeah.
So we need to be wrapping this up, but there are two really good questions that I want to get to. One, Richard, Monica asked, when did you know that the project was finished and you stopped photographing? And that's sort of it. I'll ask that question with a wink.
Yeah, so Wayne. So I was still very much in the thick of it. I mean, it was 90% done. And then Sarah Meister, do you know her? She's a brilliant woman. Uh,
She's very pushy, I think.
Brilliant. I said brilliant. I said brilliant. And she just felt like, you know what? This is an important project. We need to get it out. And by the way, it turns out the timing couldn't have been more. I still photographed after the book was done. I'm not completely done, although with the Trump tariffs, there's nothing to photograph right now. So that's been interesting. But that said, you wanted to go get it going, and I cannot tell you how important it is to have gotten it out. But normally I would have waited a little bit longer, is what I'd say.
Well,
But I think in the end, oh yeah, no,
thank you for being open to that, Richard. I appreciate it.
You were right. I was wrong.
No. There's no right and wrong, but it is a joy to be able to share this now. And we're grateful to you for considering it finished enough to go forward with this. And my last question is from Paul. Anyone can answer this, but as long as Richard answers it last. Do you all imagine how an ideal reader, in quotes, would interact with this book initially and over time? Because I think that is part of why we make books, is to encourage a response. This timeliness that we're talking about is really important, but also making something that in 50 years someone takes down off the shelves and maybe derives a new message and meaning from it. And so maybe we'll go mostly to Noa and then end with Richard about how you think an ideal reader would react to this book now and over time.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I think it's true to all photography books. It's you consume it differently at different times, depending on, what situation you are or what information you have acquired by then. So, for 100%, I think it gets better over time. Yeah.
Noa,
I'll just say
you're still young, but
it feels like a book you really want to sit with. It has that meditative quality to it that I think Richard mentioned before, where I think the longer you engage with each image, the more you'll get out of it, and the more it'll stay with you over time. On this drive that I just did from New York to California for this move, there's so many trucks on the road, and I kept thinking about, wow, there's a whole life for these containers after they get off these ships, and I kept thinking about Richard's pictures all across my drive. So it's one of those things where I think it'll pop up when you kind of least expect it, but it's everywhere. So,
Richard, thoughts for an ideal reader before we wrap up?
Well, I just want to say this has been profoundly true for me. My Telegraph 3AM work, when I made them in 1977, afterwards, I felt a little like, oops, this is kind of a failure. I didn't do it right. It wasn't a good job. But over time, it's grown and it's shifted meaning over time. And I'm so glad I now have in that book, Telegraph 3AM, for example, a record of history that nobody else has. And I feel like these container ships, just 20 years from now, 30 years from now, 40, you're going to look back on them. And I don't know how the world's going to change, but I guarantee you they will have a completely different significance. So that's the one thing that photo books do. They they transcend the limits of time. You'll see a art show, or you see these same photographs in an exhibition in New York or in a museum or whatever. It's down, it's gone. But the books you revisit, and trust me, they build meaning over time in a really interesting way.
Yeah.
I'm still obviously a great lover of the photographic book. I think it's different than Instagram and social media, which is instant stuff. It's even different than an art show or an exhibition, although you can get scalar things you can't do in a book, perhaps. But a book is its own art form and it transcends time.
Yeah. Well, thank you all. Thank you. First of all, I just want to thank our wonderful participants. They're from all over the world. I'm seeing France, Illinois, Chicago, so thank you everyone for tuning in. Thank you to FotoFocus for making this possible. Richard and Noah and Masumi, you are amazing. It's so great to be able to have this conversation with each of you. To my wonderful Aperture colleagues, Brianna and Alex, to Clark and Candle Productions, we feel very lucky to be supported by all of you. And the last thing I'll say is that if you make photo books, whether they be this size or of the more diminutive scale, the annual Aperture Photo Book Awards are now open, and we would love to see yours. Just make sure it arrives in our offices by September 5th. That's the deadline. We have an amazing jury who are looking at them. We show the 35 shortlisted books at Paris Photo every November, and then they travel around the world. The world of photo books is really a vibrant one. So there are a lot of people who agree with Richard's assessment that this is its own art form, and it is amazing to see the way artists and designers and writers work together. And so thanks all. So all of this and other photo book clubs are online on YouTube. And also, if there were any complications with something being sold out or not available, if you have trouble finding your discount code, you should write to us. And I think maybe Brianna, you would just chime in what the email is. If anyone has any problem, we are here to solve them. So thank you all. Have a great rest of your day or evening or morning, depending on where you're tuning in from. And see you soon.